and hi, and welcome to the Mrs. V Shift Stories. We were going to be on Facebook Live tonight, but we had a little bit of technicality issues. So we're on YouTube, which is probably just as awesome. Yay! And very excited tonight, we have Andrew Sloan. Welcome.
Thank you.
He is a therapist, coach, and strategist.
You got it.
The big three things which are very important today. And we've just been actually talking about many things which we could have actually kept talking for a very long time, because Andrew has such a beautiful understanding about people and the mind and what's happening in society, and could talk about many things. So we're going to actually start, of course, with, of course, we have the shift stories. The first question I wanted to ask you is, what is your story?
Yeah, that's a big question.
It is.
I suppose when I'm asked similar questions, I think of the spaces that I create. My story is often about creating spaces for people to become a little bit more aware, to transform unconscious experiences that we might be asleep towards more consciousness, towards more, some people might call that wakefulness, some people might call that more awareness. I find that those spaces where we become a bit more aware and connected to what's really going on, becoming a bit more resourceful, moving from a few tools to a lot more tools, or having more options on how to kind of respond to the world or to each other. That's who I am. I call myself therapist, coach, and strategist.
Yes.
There are more terms to make it easy to understand how you invest in my time. But it's really about creating spaces where we can become more aware about who we are and who these wonderful people who are around us, that sometimes challenge us, sometimes excite us, who are around us. So yeah.
Just so you know, Andrew is just, because I've known a lot of therapists and coaches, and there's so much kind of heart and connection, and you're accessible, and I think that's what I love about talking to you about everything. And oh my goodness, the knowledge he has about future-proofing ourselves. I can't even get us going. Well, we might touch on that.
I may,
but
yeah.
I love it because you really bring it back to the truth about who we are and why we're here, and your story too. I mean, because were you therapist? How long have you been a therapist for? What were you doing before then?
Well, I've been a fully certified therapist for about 12 months now.
Yeah.
But I've been doing coaching for about 3 to 4 years now.
Because you go into businesses and corporates and talk about...
Yeah, these spaces that I create are for individuals in my private practice, just up here in Elizabeth Street, or in teams. So I support CEOs, their senior leaders, and their entire teams to kind of wake up in many ways. I think for me, it's taking the fuss out of some of these things.
Yes.
Because I think there's been historically quite a wall between really great therapy and allowing people to access it without that fear or stigma or going, only broken people go to therapists.
I know, because that's such a thing which annoys me, because it's like a therapist is a great place. I mean, I went to therapy for 10 years. And I loved it because each week I could talk.
Yeah.
I could talk and talk and talk.
Yeah.
And in fact, I got heard.
Yeah. One of my clients said it's kind of like chiropractic for my brain. It's just like a realignment. It's a way of being self-reflected about what's happened in the past, integrating that into what's going on right now, and then starting to look forward as well. We kind of miss that part in some concepts of therapy. We definitely start to re-author a life, start to look forward a bit into the good stuff.
Very important. Well, yes, it's a big question, I know, but thank you for sharing a little bit, because I wanted people to know who you are. And what's the best advice you've ever received?
I think the best advice I have received and often give now is that success in life, the thing that you define as success, is always an inside job.
I love that. So
it is always a process of working within ourselves to unravel the complexity of who we are.
Yeah.
Because when we start to unravel that complexity of us, we start to then understand that everyone else is just as complex and just as, sometimes struggling, sometimes thumping and excited and loving life. But we end up, I think, becoming more self-aware. We end up being more compassionate.
Yes. And I think that's the thing, is that I know certainly for myself that there's that part of going, I'll just get all that right. And then when that's right, and you're trying to simplify things, but you kind of really are, we are complex beings, and it's never always right. I often talk about, as a parent, I'd get everything going right, and then all of a sudden it'll fall apart. But that was the nature. It wasn't like there's no point where it's all okay. It's actually, that's the rhythm of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, and then what is spirituality for you?
I read this question when you asked me to come on this evening, and I really love that question. In the past, spirituality meant a whole different thing to me. I've literally unearthed a new meaning of spirituality. Wow. I read this amazing book by Dan Millman, and it's called The Laws of the Spirit. And it was the first book that I read, which was of another sort of dimension and weird and could be seen as a bit esoteric and I was just so absorbed. He tells this story of a parable of a man walking through the woods, and it ends with this concept of a billion eyes peering out of one soul. And for me, that is spirituality right now. That where I have become closer to myself, I have actually come closer to others. And there's this whole kind of premise in the world right now around that one consciousness, and I think there's some sort of weight to that. I think we are all interconnected in a bizarre way. I think as I become more self-aware, I become more self-aware of others. And for me, it's that understanding of the unknown and a little bit of mystery and resting in that unknown where I find my current spirituality.
Yeah, beautiful.
I find that in the here and now in many ways, kind of decluttering my thinking and my body in a way that I can be a little bit grounded. I feel more resourceful. I feel more connected to myself and others. And that's helpful to my work, but it's also, I think, helpful to my personal relationships, everything, all of the above.
Because it's interesting, the whole idea around, I love that thinking around the space when you're meditating. It's actually the space in between the thoughts where that power and magic happens, which I love as well. But you also mentioned, I think earlier tonight, we were chatting around that work is about value-based. It's changed its thinking around. What did you say then?
Well, work from paycheck to purpose.
Yes, paycheck to purpose. Love that.
Yeah, the future of work is anchored in transforming ourselves from cogs into actually full-blooded humans. That think and feel and have emotions, but also have a level of balance and can regulate that stuff in the workplace and also in any relationship that you have.
And that waking up that you're talking about, the spirituality, is all that process, because I think it is happening on a conscious level everywhere.
And also there are actions against that, in the world right now, in technology, in politics, where we're headed to like an opposite view of that in many ways, which is a really fascinating journey of change. Because sometimes we have to take a few steps forward and then we take some big steps back.
Because that's the thing about the shadow and light. So the more light, the more shadow is going to come up to oppose. And interesting future. I love that. Yes. Thank you. And then question number 4 is, what's the tool that you use for challenges?
Challenges, yes. I use, I started using this tool many years ago when I started my therapy and coaching journey with my therapist and coach. And it's Clifton Strengths Finder. And a lot of businesses in large corporates are using it, but we're actually using it in one-to-one therapeutic and coaching relationships, and I'm using it in organizations of 40 plus.
Oh, wow.
I was actually in a large tech multinational the other week using the same tool.
Wow.
It's a beautiful tool which unearths natural patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. One of the talents is actually connectedness, which is this strength or this talent around understanding the interconnection to all humankind, which matches to my spirituality. It's quite high in my themes, And unpacking your natural ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving unearths two things. One, which is your natural capability, the goodness, the stuff that you're naturally great at. It also brings up your challenges.
Yeah.
And I have a current hypothesis around weaknesses,
Yep.
which is that they're just overplayed strengths.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Or strengths that I have laid dormant for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I may have been told as a kid that that wasn't appropriate for my gender or my age. And so I may have shelved it a little bit. So it may represent a challenge for me where my energy's drained or my relationships break down or I'm being ineffective to reaching my goals or my ambitions. And so, yeah, I think this tool, Clifton Strengths, we use it in therapy and coaching.
Beautiful.
It's
I'll write
beautiful.
it.
Yeah, put a link in.
I'm going to put a link in because I want to have a look at it myself.
Yes, we should do your strengths.
Yes.
That's a great idea. Why haven't we done that already?
It's a bit scary.
Ah,
that'd be good.
No, it's
That'd be
awesome.
That'd be good.
It's the top 5 things that you naturally do. And they've come out of a life.
Yeah.
They've come out of free personal development called life.
Yeah.
From birth to now.
Yeah.
And they show up. They're amazing.
Okay, that's the next thing we'll be talking about. That. And question number 5 is, how did you find success in your life? What was the thing?
That is such a hard question. Because that success...
It's the word, isn't it?
It's a beautiful word because it's a lot like happiness.
Yeah.
We define what it means.
Yeah.
There is no universal definition of happiness or even potentially success. My success right now is probably sitting here with you in many ways.
No, yeah.
Well, because I find myself in a space where I've come to know a few things about change, about working through hard things, working on great things, of kind of supporting people, but also through the pursuit of supporting myself. I found success through therapy and coaching, my own therapy and coaching.
Yes.
A lot of us therapists and coaches have gone through our own support process to be able to be resourceful with those tools. So for me, my greatest success was my journey of self-awareness.
Yeah, beautiful.
It was found in my top 5 strengths. As soon as I got my talents from Clifton Strengths, I woke up to why I was pissed off, why I was frustrated and angry with the people around me in my workplace. I could actually rest inside of myself for the first time, because this weird, overly strategic person who loved creating new relationships, who loved activating new ideas and communicating their power to the world, which I couldn't do that in a large corporate because they thought I was bonkers. They thought I was mad. They really did. And so as soon as I could understand why I was the way I was, I started to understand my okayness.
Yeah, yeah. So it is that finding that thing of going, God, it's okay that I have those things.
Yeah.
And it is what you're saying. It's like those weaknesses, which I often talk about, that we've talked about, is that the bits that we don't like can often turn out to be our gold. And I love that you found that through that.
I totally did. And through a therapeutic discussion, and looking at the hard stuff is good. And it allowed me to find success.
That's the thing you have to see. Looking at the hard stuff is a good thing.
It is hard though, because
It
it's
is
hard.
But and the thing is that sometimes though, which I know, God, you know this, is that we think it's harder.
Yeah.
Harder is actually the resistance to it is the worst part. Because once you get into it, you go, oh, actually it's not too bad, or look what I've come out the other end.
So many times a client will sit in front of me and they've tried to cancel a few times because of the tension in showing up.
Imagine.
They sit down and they go, I don't know where to begin. I'm like, I know. How do you start to talk about a life? How do you start to talk about the wonder of humanity in you? That's a really hard thing to start to talk about. They finish the first session and they go, oh my gosh, that was so great to just talk about it. Like they did was share the story in the first session, but they feel this sense of relief that it is valid. Their story is valid, you know?
And facing things. No, I love that. See, go for it. If you're thinking about it, go and do it. Go and see this man. Anyway, because I love him. Okay, so here we are. Teach me something new. Oh, God. What are you going to teach me?
A lot of my thinking right now is around the future.
Oh, yes. 10%.
So I'm thinking about 2035,
yes.
Where computers are literally forecasted to think and feel like humans. So it's the movement from I want that to I know I want that. And I'm pondering and I'm constantly thinking for my clients in businesses and teams, how do we need to cultivate ourselves to get ready for that future where we have computing power that has sentience or emotional intelligence, can talk us through feelings and encourage us to kind of get back in touch with our humanity in many ways, I think.
See, that's really, like, that freaks me out, really.
It freaks a lot of people out.
I go, so I think someone explained to me the other day that AI is about, it's not even a programmed thing. It is like a new being that is really making decisions based on...
We're building digital neural networks. So the neural network in your brain right now has 100 billion neurons. The current level of neural networks is 1 billion neurons. So we've got a while to go. But we're making advances. So this is a computer that can reference its own information and make decisions off the back of it. So the technology is important. AI is important to talk about. We lots of people are understanding all of the dimensions of it. For me, in my world, I'm going, how can you become more self-aware, more in tune with the humanity within you and outside of you?
Yes.
How can you lay down some of the things that aren't serving you, that aren't moving you forward? How can you move from being a cog in a machine in a team, or even as an employer supporting cogs in machines, towards purpose, towards supporting lives, humanity in your businesses? It's shifting, literally shifting people from, in leadership, just being bosses telling people what to do, to actually asking what they need. We have all of the world's knowledge and wisdom, maybe not wisdom, but knowledge at our fingertips. Now we need to show up in a different way. We need to show up in a human, vulnerable way in many ways. Our whole culture, our whole society has changed rapidly since Facebook was born. That was only about 13 years ago.
It's scary, there's a lot of change. So it's an interesting conversation then. So as far as AI goes, and I love that you're talking about, it's about connection. And how to find connection with self through that. So what is going to happen, just I know it's just such a big question, but a little snapshot, do you think, in where people can future-proof themselves with this new AI coming? Because people are frightened of losing their own jobs. And what does it look like for them? I don't have all the answers to that. No, really?
No. The hard thing about this discussion is we don't really know how it's going to play out. We don't know how the economy is going to be impacted and businesses are going to be impacted. Personally, I'm asking people, how do you follow the stuff that you are naturally great at? Not the stuff that maybe the economy has asked you to become. How can you truly work within your natural capabilities in a way that you find the passion and the drive? You know, people like you are a representation of that in the world, who have woken up and said, you know what, I could do something. And it's not always easy, but I can contribute, I can serve others. When we start to become more self-aware and more integrated into ourselves, we start looking out and we start helping others. We start giving platforms like you to other people. We start looking out and above ourselves. We think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we go up in the new normal with AI towards self-actualization. Looking at ourselves and looking up to the stars and saying, oh, wow, I'm special. I'm a human. What's more can I explore? I think we become a lot more spiritual. I think we become a lot more integrated into nature. I think we start returning to some of these peak experiences that we've dismissed with some of our technological industrial revolutions of the last 100 years.
I love it. I was just in a film then. Just as you were talking, I was like, I could see the whole thing. And it's so funny how you have the balance between there's so much other difficult and challenging stuff going on in the world. You know, like even David Cook last week talking about 45 million slaves, the most ever that's been in history. Mate. So it's like there's this whole, the light and the shadow coming up as we're coming into this age of who are we if we are creating AI. And I love that you brought that forward, that it is actually forcing us to have a meaningful life, to actually re-examine who we are and why we're doing it.
And if we do more of that, we can use AI and digitification to reshape the world in another way. You know, we're all waking up to the fact that Facebook, you know, in the last few weeks has had a lot of control over our personal information.
I know, it's something how because they changed that thinking around. Firstly, they were saying, well, we don't want to put the businesses up forward, so they've changed the whole algorithm stuff, which has thrown everything. Yeah. But at the same time, it's had a reverse effect. Even though they think they're doing the right thing, it's disrupted the flow that was naturally evolving. They've tried to control something. There's been a backlash, I believe, to it. And then also we're saying, well, hang on, you're able to tell what's going on. We don't like that. Even though we've all known that that's what they're doing, and we pay them to do that with advertising.
But also they used a lot of our data and sold it to a company to change an election or potentially affect an election. And so it's just interesting that these movements towards us becoming more conscious of how what technology impacts us and our cultural identity. You know, we are going to see this rapidly change in the next handful of years. I'm actually really hopeful. I'm really excited.
I love it.
And I think that if we do more of our work that we're all doing to wake people up and support them to understand their humanity and who they are, they're going to be using these tools in a different way as well.
Such a big conversation. We could talk for hours.
I know.
Before we were talking about
I've lost track of time.
We'll have to come back to that one. And then finally, of course, is what's the biggest shift you've had in your life?
Oh, there's been a few, but I'll just pick one. In February last year, in November of the year before last, I read a book called Presence. And it was all about becoming more mindful and present in real time to what's happening in organizations so that you can adapt quickly to cultural changes and opportunities and transform businesses, really. It's an amazing book. Go read it. It's very cool. In that book was a chapter about a guy who takes people into awareness retreats in like prime jungle locations. And I read the chapter and I said, I will never, ever do that, and closed it. And it didn't kind of leave my orbit for about 12 hours. It was kind of like pumping through me. A little bit like the Jumanji, you know, that drum? Yeah, a little bit like the drum. And so I couldn't let it go. And I spoke to my partner and I said, look, I think I really want to do this. I think this is something that I need to do. And they were really supportive and they said, go for it. Just do it. Just make it happen. And I booked it, paid for it the next day, and I had 6 months to prepare. And it was a trip to the Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica, and we had 2 days of sort of orientation and training with John Milton, who is like the father of naturism and ecology in the States. And he took us through this training of recognizing tension in the body and releasing it. This is what we do in therapy. We notice tension and we release it. This is what we do in a lot of pathways to self-awareness and understanding ourselves, is we notice tension and we release it. And then I walked about 3 hours into the jungle and I was by myself for 7 days with no human contact. I lost all sight of my face and others. I lost all concept of who I was for a little bit. No drugs, no funny business, just nature. And I sat and I understood more about who I was and what I needed to let go. I understood that the world was complex but simple all at the same time. And I got access to a space, this space that I can't really describe, I can't give language to very easily, but it's an inner space and an outer space of the lack of tension. And it was a shift because I use it with my clients. I find that space for me, and I might offer an element of that space to people in the most chaotic times. And it was just a really beautiful, I got this further concept around self-awareness of slowly revealing who we are through layers of something, I don't know. And sometimes it's in conversations. I'm even getting access to a new level of that in the retelling of the story to you. So that was probably the biggest shift. Costa Rican jungle.
Costa Rican jungle would be a big shift, I think, for anyone.
Amazing.
Oh, how amazing.
It was beautiful.
Look, I mean, your story and what you bring is extraordinary, and so privileged. We're going to be doing some work together as well in the events and in the business work that I'm doing, internal comms with businesses, and very excited about that.
Me too.
And I'm very excited for people to actually listen to you and hear, because I just love, you know, hearing your stories and what you have to talk about. I mean, as I said, we could talk forever.
We could. And
please stay tuned, because we'll probably do some more stuff. And if you want to check out Andrew's site, go to andrewsloan.com.au and we'll put the link as well below. We're going to have this up on iTunes and Facebook when I upload it, and on the site. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope you've got a shift. I've certainly had a shift out of listening to you talk tonight, so I'm very privileged to have that. Thank you. And have a great night, everyone. Good night.